over to the land of college football, and there are two marquee matchups this weekend. The four you can see on that screen are all playing. Number one, Texas plays host to Georgia this weekend. The Horns have a pair of top 25 wins under their belt and remain the team to beat in CFB. Georgia's only stain on its resume, obviously, that loss to Alabama, who head to Rocky Top to take on the Vols. Both of these teams have struggled in recent weeks with a pair of non-top 25 losses. Tennessee, they did barely eke out an overtime win last week, while Bama, a little late scare against South Carolina in the fourth quarter, as we welcome in Collin Wilson and Mike Calabrese to the show to talk a little college football and these marquee matchups ahead. Guys, let's start with this Alabama and Tennessee game. Collin, I'm going to kick it to you first. Let's focus on Alabama, right? Obviously, after the win against Georgia, we saw a hangover loss against Vandy, a shaky win against South Carolina. What's your biggest concern about this team after these previous 2 weeks?
Well, the shakiness has been going on since South Florida. I mean, there's some real worries here with Alabama and when they're going to figure it out. But as of right now, in the last two games, Vanderbilt and South Carolina had more first downs. They had more time of possession. They just did not allow that Alabama powder keg explosive offense to be on the field to generate points. Limiting possessions and taking deep shots at a timing, at certain times of the game is the way to beat Alabama. And I think the blueprint is out on that. And then the big question is can Alabama stop the Tennessee wide split spread attack that Josh Heupel always runs? That's going to come down to how well the linebacker play can be for Alabama. As far as Tennessee, are we doing Tennessee? Go ahead.
No, I was going to get the Calabrese first before we get into Tennessee because, your friend Johnny Manziel had something to say about Tennessee. So I wanted to get that in after the fact we did Alabama. Calabrese, what are your concerns with Alabama based on the last 2 weeks?
I mean, is the back end trustworthy at this point? You have to imagine that Nick Saban, in between College Game Day TV spots, has just been hate watching this secondary. He's somebody who had his fingerprints all over that positional room. They're 63rd in pass EPA this year. And when you watch the South Carolina game, when they didn't get to Lenora Sellers, he had a handful of deep shots, including that would-be game-tying touchdown. They don't get the two-point conversion there late. But when you don't get home with Alabama and this defense, there's an opportunity on the other side for Tennessee to spark some big plays, but we'll get into some of the issues that the Vols have here just in a moment.
Right, yeah, you mentioned the opportunity for the Vols to have explosive plays. We keep talking about this Alabama defense and the issues it has. Collin, the reason why I wanted to wait was I know your friend Johnny Manziel, your new BFF, talked about the Vols earlier this week, and he sounds like, or at least he thinks, that the Vols offense are going to turn it around. I'm curious, your thoughts. Are you worried about the Tennessee explosive offense and if it can actually turn things around here?
Yeah, I am. I don't have the same confidence as a lot of people that Tennessee can get back on track. Why? Because to me, they've always been a circus gimmicky offense based on timing and routes. It's never been about play calling, taking advantages of opposing defenses. It's based on the fact that they stretch the field from sideline to sideline. They run slants and goes and all of these things to take advantage of outside linebackers that cannot defend them whatsoever. That's how Tennessee scores all their points against undersized defenses that don't have the skill. So can you do that against Alabama? I'm not sure, because Arkansas defensive coordinator Travis Williams came up with a 3-3 star package that had never been on film before for the Razorbacks. Heupel didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know where they were in Fayetteville against the Razorbacks. Ended up taking a loss. And then if you want to talk about Tennessee in general on the other side of the ball, they lost their middle linebacker, Keenan Pili. He's out for the season with an ACL tear. He is the guy with the green dot on the back of his helmet that got all the communication signals in from the sideline. Tennessee's looking for a new guy on defense, too. So there's a lot of problems here with the Volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, I was largely unimpressed with Tennessee just the last month plus watching, this offense. Calabrese, I'm curious your thoughts, too. Like Nico, right, this guy that everyone was saying is going to be the Heisman dark horse, the sweetheart of the season. And he's been largely unimpressive, and it's kind of been, the run game that's gotten UT going. What are your concerns with Tennessee altogether?
Well, this unique offense that Collin just mentioned, it goes back and at least was influenced by Art Briles, and he used to have a line that said, it's haymakers to the final bell. Well, where are the haymakers from this Volunteer offense? Because it's essentially been the Dylan Sampson show for weeks. And can we trust Nico to handle more of the offensive load and handle the pressure from Alabama? because when you look at them being able to spark explosive plays, they're 84th in passing explosives overall, but even worse in passing down situations. They're outside the top 100. That's what gives me real pause in this game. And I do think that Alabama, as long as they can protect the football, they're going to steam out to a lead in this game. So Tennessee, if they're not able to play balanced football and lean on Samson, I think that's going to create explosive plays in two directions. There's going to be Nico having to force it and trying to, make something out of nothing. And then also this Alabama secondary has left people open deep downfield all season long. So I think this one could turn into a shootout.
Yeah, Alabama definitely left the door open for Georgia to storm back. Talking to Collin Wilson and Mike Calabrese from the BBOC podcast. Guys, we'll get the best bets in just a second, but looking at this game as a whole, obviously we talked about it. Alabama has the loss to Vandy and Tennessee has the loss to Arkansas. The schedule does not get any easier. A lot of top 25 matchups on deck. Collin, I ask, does a loss effectively end the season for either team in this one?
I would say both teams it ends. They both have embarrassing losses. The Vanderbilt and Arkansas. Yes, my Razorbacks are an embarrassing. But listen, there's still tough games on this schedule. For Tennessee, you're going to have to go up against Georgia. That's a number I project to be -7 right now for the Bulldogs, and a coach in Kirby Smart that's never had a problem with this Heupel offense whatsoever. And then when you look at Alabama, they essentially have to sweep a November schedule that includes LSU, Oklahoma, and the Iron Bowl. No matter what the spread is in that game, it's still going to be pretty testy. So both of them are in deep trouble if they lose this game. We don't project anybody with 3 losses to make the playoff. So you're definitely walking on the edge here if you lose this game. But to me, it's a college football playoff knockout game.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Alabama at least has a little bit more of a safety net because they have that marquee win against Georgia. Calabrese, you're not as cynical. I kind of side with Collin on the sense of like this might be do or die, especially for Tennessee. But you tend to think that there's a chance still that either team can make it with a loss.
Well, I'm taking your question quite literally. Will they be out of it with 2 losses? My answer there is no, because as long as you're an SEC member and you have 2 losses by the end of the season, you're going to be able to stack enough resume wins to get in with the committee, at least in my opinion. And it's particularly true when you look at these schedules. Do I think that Tennessee is going to rebound with a win over Georgia? No, but the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
And Alabama could do the same. I know that there's a schedule down the stretch that features Mizzou and LSU and the Iron Bowl. There's opportunities to impress the committee. Do I want to put my money behind that happening for the loser? No, I do not. But I think from exclusion perspective, neither of them are technically out of it if they lose this game.
Right. Tennessee, obviously, they're in plus money to make the CFP right now. Things kind of looking grim for them. Alabama, a 3-point favorite this weekend right now as the number stands. Total right around 56.5, 57. So let's get some best bets before we move on to the other one, Texas, Georgia. Collin, you're up first. You got a couple of plays. You actually just put in the app on this one.
Yeah, for Texas, Georgia, we're going to go.
No, for Alabama,
right.
Tennessee.
Oh, for Alabama, Tennessee, yes. We're going to go Alabama -3, or I'm going to go Tennessee on the team total under. I like Alabama -3 for the fact that Tennessee's defense should be in disarray. First off, they've never had their secondary tested because they haven't faced any passers till they saw Taylon Green, and Taylon Green put up 10 explosive passes against this Tennessee secondary. And oh, by the way, Tennessee gave up another 7 explosive passes in their last game. So that's just too much for Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams, who's the best deep ball connection in all of college football. I like Tennessee team total on the under. When you run Heupel's wide split spread, it puts emphasis on outside linebacker position and coverage. Alabama runs more man coverage than almost any other team in college football, and Jihad Campbell is the 4th-ranked man coverage linebacker in all of PFF's database. I like Alabama to limit Tennessee, and I think they're going to explode on offense.
Calabrese, you obviously think Alabama's going to explode on offense or at least do better, but you're taking the approach of the entire game being over and Tennessee maybe being able to notch a few explosive plays. Tell me more.
I was already bullish on Alabama scoring a lot in this game and then kind of sneaking over and stealing a look at Collin's notes here. Yes, the linebacker issue, the team captain issue, getting everybody lined up, getting the play calls in for the Volunteers. I think there's potential for Alabama to throw in some extra wrinkles. Kalen DeBoer is one of the best game planners in all of college football. I think this is a game where Alabama could score north of 35 points, which brings in the over 56.5 into play, in my opinion. I still can't get out of my head all of those blown coverages in the back third of the field for the Alabama defense. I think if Tennessee can find a way to protect Nico, or if he can extend plays with his legs, there's going to be some explosive plays, but also there's the potential for havoc. So a pick six, a defensive score, is also on the table. That's why I feel more comfortable with a over 56.5 than any other specific play in this game.
So Calabrese on the over. Collin taking the team total under on Tennessee. Alabama -3. You'll be able to hear their thoughts on the BBOC live show on Saturday mornings as well. But the other marquee matchup that we have to talk about here is Texas against Georgia. Texas playing host to Georgia, and over the last hour plus, we've kind of seen steam to 5 across the board. That is the Horns now favored by 5. We saw Quinn Ewers return last week for the Red River rivalry game against Oklahoma, a big dominant win out of UT. Collin, I'll kick it to you first. What's the key here with each team coming away with a win in this one?
Well, for Texas, they're going to have to shake what has been a historically bad hangover the week after Red River. If you just look at Sark alone since he took this job, lost to Oklahoma State following Red River. The year after that, barely beat Iowa State by 3. And last year, a horrific Houston team. Texas only won by a possession. I mean, they have issues with just coming away from this Red River party and excelling in the week after. So that plays in the favor of Georgia. But for Georgia, their biggest problem is Georgia themselves. They beat themselves all the time. They're outside the top 100 in penalties. Carson Beck hasn't had any downfield passing. They're just giving up too many explosives and passing downs on defense. Georgia needs to not beat themselves.
Calabrese, what about you?
I think Georgia has to make Ewers uncomfortable in the pocket in this game, and I think that's the game within the game for both sides here. Texas has allowed just 6 sacks on the entire season. Per PFF, they're #1 in pass protection in the entire country. And with all the wrinkles, all the gadgets, all the playmakers in Stark's offense, if you also add in time to operate in the pocket, whether it's Ewers or Manning this season, they've been picking teams apart, and I think that'll continue against a Georgia team. So that means, do the Bulldogs blitz? Do they go outside of their comfort zone? Because they're 3- and 4-man pass rush packages. They're not getting to the quarterback. So I think that's something I'm going to keep my eye on early in this game. Is Georgia willing to roll the dice to heat up Ewers and to make him make some mistakes? Because at this point in the season, with a clean pocket, he's been deadly.
Now, it's time for my favorite part of the segment. Collin, you're now joining me and Mike on usually every week. We get to simulate a college football game. We get to see what the NCAA 24 inputs, outputs, whatever it sees this game playing. Mike, you mentioned Georgia being able to at least stunt Quinn Ewers. Tell me what the simulation said for this one.
So we had Georgia pulling out a heart-stopping 27-24 victory, and it started early. Ewers got knocked out of this game in the first quarter. He threw an interception, took a big hit in the ribs, went to the medical tent, did not come back. The rest of this game was just absolutely wild in terms of lead changes, back and forth play. Georgia had some real issues on special teams. They missed 2 short field goals from the left hash, hooking both. They had a blocked extra point go against them. But Carson Beck elevated himself in the second half, finishing 21 for 27 for 321, 4 TDs, and 1 pick. But he also was able to rely on Etienne in the backfield, 149 yards rushing. But the real story, in my opinion, watching this game unfold was Arch Manning came off the bench, and yes, Georgia was able to get pressure, but unlike Ewers, he was able to use his legs. 54 rushing yards, finished 18 for 27, 225 yards, 2 scores, led them to a go-ahead score late in the fourth quarter, targeting Isaiah Bond early and often in this one. But in the final drive, some wild back and forth. There was a 4th down conversion, a pass to his tight end. They ruled it complete on the field. Georgia challenged it. They upheld it. Texas had an opportunity to win the game, trailing by just 3 points. Arch Manning, unfortunately, pressured, heated up in the pocket, threw an interception to Dalen Everett, the game-winning pick. So the Bulldogs get a season-saving win on the road on the 40 acres.
Collin, what are your thoughts here? Usually I'm the one that gets to respond, but since we have you, since we have the NCAA football expert, I know maybe Quinn Ewers being knocked out in the first quarter is something that's incredibly difficult to predict, but do you kind of see this being a back-and-forth game like that?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Anybody that rises up the Heisman board always gets knocked back down. So Georgia would take this any days, right? I mean, they are only 84th in havoc this season, and to get 2 INTs off Ewers in the beginning, that would be glorious for them. And really a great showing getting pressure on Quinn Ewers here. And the simulation really spoke to what the problem with the Georgia offense is here. Carson Beck has to find answers downfield passing. Now that Brock Bowers isn't there, really kind of dependent on one or two targets. I think the simulation shows what would happen if Georgia used all of their pieces and if they don't beat themselves on defense and get some pressure on Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, and just to follow up now, we could talk about our best bets for this one. We have to still get to this. The steam I just talked about, Texas took a lot of steam. They've moved up to 5-point favorites in this one. Collin, that's kind of played perfectly into your angle in this, is buying Georgia, but more specifically in the first half.
Yeah, we're going to do Georgia first half plus 3.5. Thank you for whatever availability report came out that beefed this Texas number up, which I make this number Texas -7. So I expected it to go up, which I've been kind of hesitant. But going in on the action app right now, I'm putting in Georgia plus 3.5. Just a historical perspective with a problem that Texas plays the week after Red River. And plus, look at what Georgia's been doing the last couple of weeks. 0 blitz base defense against Mississippi State, just letting them hang around that game last week. They've put nothing on film from a defensive perspective over the last couple of weeks. They're going to turn on the Jets from a blitz perspective and an aggressiveness. You can see that here in this game. They've been saving it up. So I like Georgia early in this game to kind of quiet that crowd. Texas probably ends up winning, but I like Georgia to cover both half and full game.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense with the hangover and all that Texas has to come back from. Georgia also having that loss, being hungry to at least make a statement early, saving stuff for this game because if they lose to Texas, it's their second loss, and we're talking about 3 losses being the axe on the SEC. Calabrese, I guess you don't have a pregame bet in this one, but you are looking to attack live, so tell me more on that.
Yeah, leaning Texas, but this number moving away from me is not something that I was anticipating or hoping for. But here's the thing. I mean, Sark is 19-28 in his career against ranked opponents. I understand that he beat Bama on the road last year, and they clearly outplayed Michigan and Oklahoma this season. But those Michigan and Oklahoma wins, as we move further down the season, how impressive are they going to look in November and December? For that reason, what my dream scenario would be, Georgia gets on the board first, preferably with a touchdown. This moves closer to a pick'em, and then I can go with the Texas team play on the live number because, as I mentioned, I think the game within the game, they're able to protect their quarterback. And in terms of offensive game planning, Sark is just as good as Kalen DeBoer, in my opinion, at this point in this season. Everything that he's been able to dream up, protect him. He's going to get the ball to his playmakers, of which he has many in this game. So I think if it's below a field goal at any point and they're only down by, let's say, 7 points, hop in on the Longhorns on a live play.
I am excited for this one. 2 top 25 matchups, 2 must-watch games for Saturday. Last week, we got a bunch of must-watch marquee matchups as well. College football right in the thick of the best time of year, and you can obviously check out Collin and Calabrese on BBOC every Saturday morning where they'll dish out their best bets, and they'll be able to break down this top 20, these 2 marquee matchups further. But guys, there are games tonight. We're in this stretch of like 50+ football game every single day. Collin, you're up first, 7 o'clock p.m. Sam Houston State hosting Western Kentucky, and you like the hashtag Eat 'em Up Cats.
Eat 'em up, Cats. I said the same thing in July to Calabrese on our preview of Conference USA. I love this team. Essentially, if you're going to stop Western Kentucky, you're going to have to stop Caden Veldkamp from passing here. That is the Bearcats' specialty on defense. They're top 30 in creating a pass rush, much better numbers in coverage grading and against the pass than they are against the run, and that's what's going to happen here. But Western Kentucky, their defense is horrific in stopping explosive passing. That's just not going to work against Hunter Watson, who, by the way, is the quarterback of Sam Houston, is also the leading rusher here, extremely potent on the ground. Quarterback, he leads the team in rushing yards, and 75% of them come off of design calls. So it's RPO central, mostly on the R for Hunter Watson. It's just going to be too much. And think about this. I mean, Sam Houston took Texas State to the limit and beat them. This Western Kentucky team is not as potent as they have been in years past, and they're definitely not the offensive Texas State. So let's roll with the Bearcats here and get started on that 25-1 that we made last July.
Yes, hashtag Eat 'em Up Cats. I'm going to be on this one as well. Mike Calabrese, you, 2 hours later, targeting FIU against UTEP, the winless minor nation, and, you focus on G5. That's your main area. You've called plenty of upsets in the past, and you like UTEP to finally get their first win in CFB.
So 0 for 6 on the season. Let me walk you through the resume. It's been brutal. I think by season's end, we'll look back, and 5 of those 6 teams that beat them will go bowling. where they're up against an FIU team here that's a roller coaster. I can say, because I bet on almost every one of their games, I've been right, I've been wrong, but I can tell you that it's basically an exercise in extremes. They boat race Central Michigan, and it was a pick parade in that one. I think they had 5 interceptions. They win going away. Then they turn around the next week. They lose to FAU and Cam Fancher. Anyone who's listened to my show knows my thoughts about Cam Fancher. Then they take a loss to FCS Monmouth. Shout out to our production crew and all the Monmouth alums, but that is a bad loss to be taking at that point in the season. Then they squeeze out a single possession win over a lifeless La Tech team, and then losing a heartbreaker in overtime to Liberty. And that's really where this play is predicated, because that is an emotional letdown. That was their season-defining win, an opportunity to make the math work for them to be able to get to bowl eligibility. Now they have to come back against a UTEP team that they're not going to get up for. They're going to look at the record and say, this is an easy win. We can just roll the helmets out. We're going to be fine. They're not at Pitbull Stadium. Maybe if they had all that Dolly music playing, they could really make it happen. But here on the road, I like UTEP against an FIU defense that's lifeless. You can move the ball freely. 109th in success rate. They drop a ton of people into coverage. 80% of their defensive snaps are either pure zone or a hybrid. They want to stop explosives, but they give teams an opportunity to string together successful plays. And that's what UTEP needs, a little bit of confidence in this game. Cade McConnell, their quarterback, is going to be a game-time decision. But even if we get Skylar Locklear, their backup quarterback, he started multiple games this year. He looked fine against Southern Utah in an overtime loss and completed 26 passes against Liberty. So whether it's McConnell or Locklear in this one, I think UTEP finally gets over the hump at north of 2-1. I'm going to roll the dice with Miner Nation.
Rolling the dice with the Miners to get their first win. Our producer Gifford did not deserve that shout out on Monmouth, but I'll let it slide this time. Mike Calabrese, Collin, Wilson, appreciate you guys hopping on. A reminder yet again, you can find them Saturday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on the BBOC YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.